Hi everyone, this is a video about how you can make your own stockings out of knitted fabric just like these. Here's my name, here's my website. This is the pattern that we're going to be using today to make the knit stockings. And if you want to go directly to the pattern, this is what you would put in. Sorry for the flip chart, but I'm old school too, so it helps me keep organized. This is also another one of our companies. We print patterns. Whether you want to have your tile patterns print full size or you're a pattern maker and you want to have your patterns printed. So if you'd like a short overview of the history of stockings, you can go to this blog spot. Also go to this Pinterest board and you'll see many types of stockings, chiefly historical. And that's the actual Pinterest board address. So the answer to the question of why I make my own stockings when they're available, well, there's lots of reasons. Mainly, one is fit. If you're big, tall, short, thin, you have big feet or you have small feet relative to the size of store-bought stockings, you can make your own stockings and not have to worry about any of that. Design. There are so many designs of, in what we're using is a 4-way stretch knit that it's almost unbelievable all the different types of fabrics you can use. And I'll be going over a lot of those and what you should look for. As far as historical, knitted stockings were around for, well, they're found in Egyptian tombs, so they've been that long. Certainly in Europe from the 16th century, and not only that, but a machine to knit stockings was invented in around about 1589. So not only were there knitted stockings, but there were machine knitted stockings. 18th century, you're going to see a lot of clocked stockings, and we have embroidery for that too. This is where the embroidery happened around the ankles. Regency also did clocking. In the 1820s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, you say why, or in the Civil War 1860s, why should I want to wear decorative socks because the skirts were long? But that's just the point. Your stockings and shoes were visible every time you took a step, up and down stairs, getting in and out of a carriage, and when you're dancing. So the ladies knew that, and they took advantage of that, and they wanted to have decorative stockings. And certainly, in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, the fad was resurrected for embroidered stockings, and all different kinds of embroidered stockings were available. For instance, down the front like this one, and also here's one in a wheat pattern. So the Victorian time was also a very big time for stockings. And then in the 19th century, the Edwardian in the 1920s and 30s, very much interest, especially in the Edwardian time, of embroidered stockings in all different colors. It's probably not known as well. In the 1920s and 1930s, it was quite the fashion to match your dress to your stockings or your shoes. And so if you are doing Gatsby, you're missing out if you're not doing something really interesting with your stockings. As far as that goes, World War II, when there was no silk available for stockings, a lot of cotton stockings were worn, especially even the ladies in uniform wore cotton stockings. And in the 1950s, there was a big fad for matchy-matchy. Your hat, your bag, your stockings, your outfit, they all had to match. And of course, from now until now, all of these genres, cosplay, steampunk, goth, fantasy, anime, Halloween, if you're missing out on using this wide expanse of your legs to further your design concepts, I think you're missing out. So, what kind of fabric is the best to make stockings out of? I prefer 4-way knit. Now you can use 2-way knit, that's not a problem. except that it will be a little bit harder to fit, and if it's not stretchy, it may bag. Now, if you're 18th century, bagging may be period correct. So we will talk about the fabric. Then we'll talk about preparing the fabric. If you're kind of squeamish about using knits, there's a couple things you can do to reduce the irritation that it can cause. We're going to talk about alterations to the pattern, how to cut out, the construction, and then we'll go through view A, view B, and view C. So when we talk about fabric, usually a material or cloth, there's two things you want to think about when you're describing your cloth, is what kind of weave and what kind of fiber. In four-way stretch, the weave obviously is knit. There are some others like neoprene and things like that that stretch. But for the most part, we're going to be using four-way stretch. The other fiber, the fibers, opposed to the weave, we'll talk about what kind of fibers you use and where does that stretch come from. So when you talk about the fiber content, a lot of times you'll say, I bought some spandex, but you're probably not really talking about 100% spandex. In fact, the stretch is usually only 10% of what's in the fiber. And the 10% stretch that we use most now is this. It's a copolymer, and it was invented in about 1960, around there, late 50s. And it goes by different names, but it's the same fiber. In Europe, they're more likely to call it elastane, but the two of the copyrighted names or trademark names are spandex and lycra. They are, in fact, all the same fiber. They're just different names for it. Now, the other 90% of your fabric is going to be something you're probably a little more familiar with. Rayon and bamboo come from cellulose. Nylon, acrylic, and polyester are man-made fibers. And cotton, silk, and wool are some of the other fibers that you can find in four-way stretch. Well, I've never seen a linen four-way stretch. And by the way, wool and silk are hard to find in four-way stretch. With wool, you're most often going to find a sweater knit, and that'll ravel. So you have to be careful for that. So first of all, you want to prepare your fabric and wash and dry your fabric as you will wash and dry your stockings, because stockings are going to be wanted to be washed, and you want to do that to get any shrinkage and anything that any surface preparation they may have put on it off there, so you can see what you're dealing with. Now you want to use a surface stabilizer if desired. If you're using a stretch that's very squirmy, and some of these really are, and you don't want that, you can put a fabric stabilizer on them and make it more stable so you can cut it out easier. Two of them, you can just use a regular spray starch. And then you hit it with an iron. And another one, for instance, is called Terrial Magic. And the instructions for this is you put it in a bowl and you completely get it completely wet with the Terrial Magic. Then you spread it out, let it dry, and then hit it with an iron. And then it will become much more stable and easier to use. And also it won't curl as much, so it's a great idea. And just to reiterate, four-way stretch knits fabrics do not unravel or run. So that's something that you don't have to worry about as you construct your garments or your stockings. Also, how am I going to make these fit me? Well, in the pattern, there's diagrams exactly on how you can change the fabric, change the pattern to fit you. Whether you need to widen the thighs or lengthen the toe, shorten the toes, and to widen the ankle. And you might want to widen the ankle if you're doing clocking at the ankle, because the stretch point for a stocking is where your foot goes past the ankle. That part is the place that you have to have the most stretch, otherwise you'll break out the back stitching. And all other different kinds of alterations, so you can make these socks fit exactly as you want to. When you make your pattern, you want to do a trial sock, and you want to use the knit that is closest to your fashion fabric, so you can make sure that it fits. Now what we're going to do is take a look at some of the wide variety of fabrics that you can use in four-way stretch that are available to us. And you can find these at the big box stores, but you can also find them online. Etsy has a huge amount of sellers, and online you can just find just tons of them. What's a little difficult is that they don't actually use four-way stretch as a search term, so I have had to go into some sites and actually look at every single knit to find out whether it's four-way stretch or not. So let's take a look at some fabrics. Show you the stretch in this. This is cotton. It stretches this way and it stretches this way. All these are plain cotton with elastane or spandex or lycra in it. You can get this in a huge array of colors. This is probably the most stable. It doesn't curl too much and it's opaque. You can't see through it. So cotton, this is often called sport lycra, but once again, look at the end of the bolt and see what it's made of, and it'll show you that it's made of only a small percentage of stretch and the rest is cotton. Okay, next category. This could be made of cotton, but it is, in fact, these are made of rayon or bamboo. And the difference in this is it can be called jersey, but the terminology is pretty here and there. The difference with this is you can actually see through it a little bit. So I like this because it mimics the actual stockings, silk stockings that would have been worn. You can actually see through it a little bit. And the colors, these are all mainly pastels, but every color under the earth here. Now we get into another category, which is really fun, is some of the prints. And anything that you could make, say, a swimsuit out of or a t-shirt. Stripes. There's a million of them. Prints, all different sorts, cute. And isn't this a kick? So much fun. And then you can actually get some four-way stretches that actually look, this doesn't stretch too much this direction, look like wool or this actually happens to be a polyester, but oftentimes it's acrylic, so it can have the appearance of wool even if it isn't. And then we get into the meshes. This is called power mesh, but it's also known as illusion, which can be confusing because there's also a bridal veil called illusion, and that's not the same thing, obviously. This is extremely stretchy, and if it matches your skin tone, it can actually look like you're not wearing anything at all, and that is why they call it illusion. And quite a few ice dancers wear this kind of thing, where they can look like that they have a strapless outfit on, when actually they're quite encased in this. This is you can embroider on this, and it's really great. It's called power mesh. Comes in a lot of colors. This is also a mesh, and it comes in all different kinds of patterns. I've even seen it in like spider webs, that kind of thing. Very cute. This is called triple mesh, and it's the same thing, but it's a lot more opaque. But it's still see-through. Once again, I think this triple mesh, if you can find it, really mimics the old silk stockings. And here's two stockings made with print, which isn't that cute? More categories. This is quite often called spandex. You can see these are remnants or just pieces of fabric that I have, and you can see they're quite shiny. So yes, they have a lot of spandex in them or lycra, but they're probably nylon or polyester. They give that shine. Then this is a small category for sure. This is silk. Very difficult to find. When you do, it'll be expensive. This is one four-way silk stretch that I found online, and it very much possibly is a blend. But this would be good because you could dye this as well. This is the silk knit that you can, this is the silk knit that you can find on Dharma Trading. It comes in a tube. This is one of the few reliable, more or less, places that you can find fabric almost all the time. And so they have it. Unfortunately, it comes in a tube. This is only two-way stretch. However, if you really want silk, this is really very, very nice. And if you want to, I mean, there's so many fabrics now that aren't knits. If you really wanted to, you could make yourself a pair of socks out of just about anything. This is silk charmeuse, and it's got so much stretch in it, although only one way. You know, you could actually use that if you really wanted to. It would take a lot more fitting as far as your feet go. And no, I'm not done. Okay? Now, in the 1820s, 30s, 40s, like that, something called open work was very fashionable. And this is an actual sock. This is a very simple open work pattern. So if you were to if you wanted to find a knitted fabric that mimicked this, and you wanted to put an inset that looked like it, there's lots and lots of laces that you can use, four-way stretch, that would make really great stockings. Unfortunately, this you have to watch out for. This was advertised as a four-way. It is not. And I let them know that it, I got it online, of course, not four-way, and they still haven't corrected it. So, a word to the wise, beware. Here's another stretch lace, really great stuff. And you don't have to make the whole sock of this. You can make an insert or stripes or whatever you want to. Now, for the really fun stuff, not only do they have stretch velvet that you can make socks out of, but they have burnout stretch velvet. They have regular velvet, they have crushed velvet, and here's some burnout that's especially pretty, I think. Four-way stretch. And then this, for all you cosplayers and Halloween people, anybody like that, mermaids. This is actually kind of a neoprene, but it is four-way stretch, although not as much as some of the really stretchy stuff, but they have all kinds of things. Iridescent, cracked ice, holographic, you name it. And this, for instance, not only can you have sequins, which would make a really interesting pair of nylons, four-way stretch. This is thanks to ice dancers and performers like that they make this. It's actually, the sequins are sewn onto power mesh, which we've talked about that before. Same here. Not only can you find things that have sequins on them, but you can find power mesh lace with 3D effects. So I'm telling you, there's a lot of things out there that you can make stockings out of. Okay, we're going to do some cutting out now. What I've done is I've laid out my fabric, and this particular fabric I've stiffened it a little bit with Terrial Magic, which is this. You could have also done it with spray starch. It's hard to tell, but this is untreated and it's very floppy and stretchy, and this is a lot more firm. So what I've done, this is view A, and view A is the leg and a foot, and I've used cardboard, just because I make so many of these. So I've got these cut out with cardboard, but using tissues, exactly the same thing. And I've got all the markings on here, and I'm careful to line up my stripes so that they're going the same way on the stocking. And so what I'm going to use is this. I want to use a rotary cutter on this, because if I use my scissors, then it has a tendency to shift around and squirm. It's not impossible, it's just easier to use. So I'm not going to bore you with the details, but I'm going to cut out this leg and this foot in a different color so that you can see what view A looks like. And I'll also add that for this demonstration, I'm using a print, and the reason for that is so you can easily see which is the right side and which is the wrong side when I go to stitch it. So I'm just going to cut this out now. I should add, if you're embroidering your fabric should already be embroidered before you cut out. I'm going to cover more about embroidery in a separate video. So I'm going to get ready to cut these out. Okay, so I have cut out the leg piece and the foot piece for view A. Here's the leg piece. I've got that here. And the foot piece is over here. And I cut that out of a polka dot. And there's one more step that you want to do before you pick up your fabric and start to sew it. And that is you want to mark the fabric and the markings that are shown on the pattern there. And what this does is help you line up the pieces. So I'm going to make a mark here and here on this pattern, and here and here. And that tells me where I can line up my foot piece. So, and I'm going to do the same thing with the foot piece. Mark here, 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 and here. And I'm using, just to let you know, I'm using Crayola washable markers. And I'm using the black just so perhaps it's a little easier for you to see. But these do wash out, but above all, test on, they might not wash out for you. I put a little spray wash on them and it comes right out. It comes in a lot of colors, but use whatever marker that you like to use. So I'm not going to show you cutting out of all the different views. I will show a little bit about sewing the different views, because the cutting out is really quite the same thing. View A has two pieces, a leg and a heel, and this is the entire bottom of the foot. View B also has only two pieces, the toe and the leg. View C is a little more complicated because it has a gore, and it has a toe, a gore, and a leg piece. And we'll be talking about view C separately. It's a little more of a challenge. And so I'm going to pick this up and show it to you. Here's the leg piece, and I've got my markings on it. You can see my markings. And here's the foot piece, and I can see my markings on that too. So I'll be cutting out the rest of them, including view C. View C is a little harder to stitch, but not to cut out. So I'll be cutting out all those three, and then we'll be looking at how to stitch them together. Now, you're just going to watch over my shoulder as I sew this. If you can't see clearly, it doesn't really matter. It's just sewing, and I will show you the finished product over here. So with view A, we have the body of the leg, and here's the foot. So I'm going to pin this together, matching the dots. And what you're going to notice when you first look at this is that it looks like it doesn't go together, but it does. And the reason that this piece is bigger than this piece is so that the top part can go over your foot, and then just the foot part will be under there. So now I'm going to pin this, matching the dots that I have. And the notch at the toe. Sometimes pins get stuck in knit and it bunches up. I'm going to go all the way around until I match way up here by the heel. Just dot here. And as you see, even though we don't match 1 to 1, sorry, I'm a little clumsy because this fabric is extremely squirmy and hard to grab hold of. Same thing over here. I can see that dot. Now, if you can't see what I'm doing exactly, trust me, it's just sewing. Now, the seam allowances are only 1/8, but if you want to go 1/4 or something like that, that's perfectly fine. So, right sides together, here's the leg, here's the foot. Now, it might be a little easier to start here and go that direction and then that direction rather than going all the way around, whichever. Now, in my faff, I can use a regular stitch because I have a walking foot. Now, if you don't have a walking foot, and what you can do is actually stretch the fabric yourself so it becomes a little stretched, or you can use a zigzag, or you can use any one of the number of stitches that you might have on your machine. You'll just have to experiment. Now I'm going to backstitch because I can get away with it, but oftentimes you can't because your backstitching will get stuck under your throat plate. So I'm going to go really fast. Probably won't be too tidy, but I'm hoping for the best here. Just so you can see, I'm just stitching right sides together all the way around, and I'm going to stop right at the dot. Went a little bit past, no problem. And I'm going to backstitch because I can get away with it. So you can see I've stitched all the way around to the dot here. And I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Being that tidy. So, as you can see, here's the leg side, and here is the foot side. It's just stitched all the way around. Now what I'm going to do, oh, and by the way, make sure you make your marks, especially this one here at the back of the heel on view A and on the leg, because that way you can tell where the heel is supposed to be. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pivot this. I'm going to bring this around to meet this. I hope you can see what I'm doing here. Matching up the dots at the heel. And matching here. Or just pinning it. Whoops. There we go. Now I'm going to sew this side, and then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Now what you have here is very little seam allowance, and when you stitch this, if you're not careful, you'll get a little lump, bump, or a tuck. It's not a big deal if you do, because this is just the pivot point here, and it can be a little bit tricky. I did was sew all the way around here, stopped before the marking for the heel. I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to pull this out, pull out my heel piece, pivot at this pivot point right here, match the heel dots, and line this up. And I'm going to sew on this pivot point. See, I didn't quite get to the dot, but that doesn't matter. I'm still just going to go around here. I'm going to stop before the heel. I've sewn the foot to the back here. So now what I'm going to do, see the foot is stitched all the way around. I'm going to sew up the back of the stocking from top to the bottom. See, I did. I got it caught in the throat plate. That can happen. Start over. Sorry, I'm being fast and not particularly tidy. Now, I'm going to come and I'm going to end right at the dot here. And I'm going to check both sides to make sure I stitched. See, I got a little open spot there. I should rip that, but instead I'm just going to sew back over it. Now you will probably be a lot more tidy than I have been. As you can see, just sewn all the way up the side. Now that I should fix, because that's kind of a weird little problem. But I've sewn it all the way down here to the point. Now what I do is I look and I see if I've got anything missing here. And then I would sew that too, so that there's no holes between the foot, the heel, and the leg. I should go back and fix that strange little thing right there. But basically what we've got here is a stocking. Now, here's the whole foot. And there's the stocking all made together. Now as you see here, right here where the pivot point is, that's a point of strain. You might want to take a couple of extra stitches here, either by hand or by machine. Now I didn't manage to get a pucker here. I usually do. It seems pretty smooth there. Something to strive for, I suppose. So that's view A, and you might use this if you don't want anything on the bottom of your feet. Now let's take a look at view B. Excuse me, over here. It is also two pieces. It's the leg and the toe, and then this is the toe. The heel itself, though we had a heel over here, is part of the separate foot. In this case, the heel is part of the leg. So basically, and what I did was I put pins where I needed to mark, because with the black fabric you can't really tell. So once again, I'm going to put right sides together. And once again, it's going to look like it doesn't fit, but it does. And, you know the reason for that. So that the actual top of the leg foot is bigger than the bottom. And, oh, that guy kind of fell out, but I know it's right about here. I go up to here. And this is, you really want to mark that. You want to stitch to that dot and not beyond, because this is going to end up being another seam. So we want to go right to the top, and this is the pivot point there, right where the hole is, excuse me, the end of the slash line. Here, we go right to the end of the slash line, or close to it. pin. Once again, probably easier to stitch from this direction to the side rather than going all the way around. So that's what I'm going to do. Make sure I'm careful to stop and leave myself a pivot point, some seam. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to come around from the toe. Stitch. Make sure that enough of the seam there. I'm getting away with back stitching. So now here's what you've got. Oops, hate dropping my scissors. All right, right sides together. Here's the toe, and here's the rest of the sock. All right, now what we're going to do, this one's a little different, is that we're actually going to sew up the back seam before we finish the foot. So we're going to go all the way, and I kind of cut a hunk out of that, and that's not a good idea. So I'm going to match up this. And I'm going to sew all the way down the back seam. This is very slippery stuff, so wow, this is like a swimsuit material. So I'm going to have a little bit mess with it. Make sure I'm more or less. And of course I'm going to have to go sorry, it's very squirmy. There we are. We're going to come around the band here of the heel. So in there, back stitch, because I can get away with it. Cut. All right, this is what it looks like at this point. The sock sewn together, but there's a hole right there. Okay, so now we're going to sew up this hole where the bottom of the toe meets the heel. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to turn this sideways. We're going to push in the heel, and then we're going to draw this across like this. Push in the heel, there's the toe, there's the heel, and there's the place that we've got to stitch together. Now you want to keep everything out of the way if you can, and match. Make sure it's relatively the same, right? Yeah. And then pin that, that's in the middle. And keeping everything else out of the way, you're going to sew this by the heel to the toe, keeping everything else out of the way. Now, again, we're going to have a pivot point, which is right there. There's another chance to get a lump, a bump, or a pleat. But, once again, it really doesn't make that much difference. So I'm going to pull this. You can see how there's almost no seam allowance right there. You can try to get as close as you can. And stitch. And I've got my fingers crossed I won't get a little pleat, but I might. Okay, let's see how I did. So you can see that I have now stitched this part. So pull out the heel, I got the toe, like that. It looks like I did reasonable job. We'll find out. And here we have it. Not bad. A little lumpy. Got a little bit of a bump right there. I'm not too worried about it. Same thing over on this side. I did a pretty good job. Once again, this is a stretch point, a stress point, I mean, and you might end up wanting to take another couple of stitches there, either by hand or by machine. So, simple as that. Now, to finish the tops, they're all the same. What you want to do is cut off a length of elastic that's comfortable at the top of your thigh where you want your stockings to be, and then just simply turn over the top, stitch, leave a hole, and then thread your elastic through and then stitch it closed, and so you have an elastic at the top. Now you may want to not do that and just, if you're going to use a suspender belt, you might not want to, or you might want to put elastic and a suspender belt, depending on a lot of things. Your stockings might stay up and they might not without help. So here we have it. So now I'm going to set up for view C, which is a little more complicated than these two, and these are very simple. 2 pattern pieces, and that's it. You saw how quick I stitched that up. So let's do view C. Get these pattern pieces out, or these out, so you can get a really good look at them. Here's the toe piece. Here's one gore. Here's the other gore. And if you can, I don't know, you probably can't see, but I've made marks on these, and these marks are pretty important to stitching the gore into the stocking correctly. So here I have the markings that I've made for view C. This is the important mark. Now, if you're doing some embroidery, you can extend this mark, but just so long as you know where the top of this is. And the reason for that being important is that's where the top of the gore goes. You don't want to cut any further than the top of that gore, because you are going to have to, you're going to slash these to insert the gores. So the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and slash this right up to the top. Let me get my scissors. Oh, and I want to point out these markings. This is an important marking right there. This one is, because that also has to do with the gores, this dot here. Then these other dots have to do with sewing the toe piece to it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to slash these. And this is probably somewhat of an advanced technique. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to take the long straight edge, the one that doesn't have a marking, and with right sides together, you're going to stitch this, the long side, all the way from the top to the bottom. And I'm only going to do one for you, but you're going to do exactly the same thing on the other side. I'll do that. You don't necessarily have to watch. Okay, here's the top. And here, the bottom. And this is the long straight side. So I'm going to stitch that right to the dot. And stop at the dot. That's really important. this is what it looks like. Knit is very squirmy. Alright, so now you've got your gore stitched into one side. So what you're going to want to do, push that over in there. Now here's another place where you might get a lump or a bump or a pleat. You're going to right sides together, pull this over, and then match the dot that you see here. And it's important that you stop stitching at that dot. So I'm going to pull this right up here, pull this out of the way. You can see there's almost no seam allowance right there at the top. Do the best you can with that and stitch it. This is what it looks like on this side. Oh, I didn't catch that, so I'm going to go back and get that. Didn't catch that either down there. But I did a pretty good job on this side. And this is where you see towards the heel it's stitched all the way up, but towards the toe it's not. So I'm going to go back and catch those holes that I left. Okay. Alrighty. So we've inserted our gore. And look up here. I haven't done too bad. I went a little too far because there's my dot, but it is not, at least there's not a lump or a bump. Once again, this is a strain point. And you might want to take, I got a nice little wad of thread up there. Anyway, you might, looks like my bobbin's hosed up or something. Anyway, you might want to take a couple of extra stitches here because that's going to be a strain point. This is what it looks like right now. Now, I'm going to go and separately do the same thing to this side. And that's, then we can insert the toe part. Okay, I got better of it. I'm going to show you that side too, because it's maybe seeing both sides would make it a little easier. Once again, the long straight side goes towards the heel, and the dot at the top matches the dot at the top of the slash. I'm going to sew this from all the way to the bottom to the top. Wing. I'm going to stop at the dot at the top of the slash. Okay. Right sides together, and we're going to do the same thing, right sides together. I'm going to bring this side over here. And I'm going to match the black dots up there, bottom. I'm going to pull this through. And I'm going to stitch that. And maybe I'll get away with no lumps or bumps once more. Just start at the dot and go to the top. Making sure all this is out of my way, under there. And this is lined up, probably. Checking on y'all. Pull this aside. Make sure all this stuff is out of the way. Let's see if I did that. I did. Okay. Check it out on this side, on the right side. And there we go. Not too bad. Well, this is what it looks like at this point. Got your stocking and the gores. So now you're going to stitch the toe piece. Once again, remember, right sides together. Matching dots. And just like view B, you're going to want to stitch just to this dot and not past it because you're going to have a seam allowance up here. So this dot and this dot should match. I got pretty close there. Close enough. Once again, you may want to start at the bottom and sew around. Stitch the other side of the toe. And I gotta watch out for the underside here. Stitch the dot. Okay, this is what this looks like now. So now what you want to do is stitch the back seam together. This is starting to look familiar. This is like view B, only you've got an extra this in there. So now I'm going to stitch. Oops, I caught something in there in my stitching. Bummer. Now if you're going to, once again, sew all the way up the back, so that you've got your legs stitched together and the toe separate. So I'm going to do that now. You should match relatively well. Now this is open right here. And I probably did a sort of okay job matching. Probably not. Now look, I've got a little skinny place right there, so I'm going to stitch back over that. This is what it looks like now. So we've got toe piece, gores, and the rest of the sock. Once again, well, yes, I have a very untidy sewer. Okay, here we go. We're going to spread this apart. We're going to tuck that heel in. We're going to pull this away so that once again we have this bottom seam that's on the bottom of the foot exposed, and nothing else is in the way of it, right? So you make sure it's more or less, you match the notches, bend this, and now I'm just going to stitch right across from dot to dot. That's gourmet is gourmet, right? Making sure that these are together and nothing else is in there. So directly across. And hopefully there's a place where the three pieces of fabric come together. And hopefully you do a pretty good job. Alright, this is what it looks like now. This is this last seam that you sew. Alright, so let's turn this inside out and see how good a job I did. Well, I'll be darned, not too bad. Once again, here's a strain point. You might want to take a couple of extra stitches there. But you can clearly see the three separate pieces. Gore, this is the leg, and this is the toe piece. So, if you see, it's a little more complicated than the others, but not by much. And this is the one you want to do if you're going to do 18th century clocking that goes down on either side of the gore. Now we're going to have a separate video on how to do the embroidery, but here we go. Like, for instance, this one. Here you can see what we did. This is where the embroidery goes. And you embroider first before you cut out. And then you have the gore, the foot piece, and the rest of the sock. So there you are. And I'll show you, here's one that you can see where you put some elastic at the top. You just stitch it in there. It's no biggie. Again. And here's the point is important too. That's where you stop your embroidery at the top here. But anyway, there you are, A, B, and C. Very, very easy. And I hope that you have a lot of fun making all these different kinds of socks. Super, super easy. Thanks for watching.